As humans, we rely on promises and on the trust that those who make promises will keep them. When we turn to human leaders who promise to bring us a better future, we often find that we are disappointed. In a poem entitled "What the Pandemic is Saying to the World," Father Richard Rohr writes, "Many to whom you look for power and leadership have shown themselves to have empty hands, minds, and hearts." Advent is a promise to us of fullness. Fullness in the coming of Jesus Christ. With God, there is an abundance beyond measure that spans the vastness of the universe. Advent invites us to lean into the promise of a leader who is a humble shepherd of God's people. He does not announce his greatness, but instead faithfully walks with the flock, and the sheep know his voice. Those whom the world would disregard embody the promise of God's salvation. God promises to be born into the flesh of exile and promises security amid the chaos.
From the prophet Micah. People of God, I write to you now of God's promised restoration of Israel and the promised Good Shepherd who leads us as we await the Lord's coming. From the beginning, God's promises to be faithful. The Good Shepherd will be born to a maiden, not in a metropolis, but in a land as humble as his leadership. I write to remind us of the promised deliverer. I write to proclaim God's faithfulness, even as the waiting seems to be endless. Hear now of God's promise. But you, O Bethlehem of Ephrathah, who are one of the little clans of Judah, from you shall come forth for me one who is to rule in Israel, whose origin is from of old, from ancient days. Therefore he shall give them up until the time when she who is in labor has brought forth. Then the rest of his kindred shall return to the people of Israel. And he shall stand and feed his flock in the strength of the Lord, in the majesty of the name of the Lord his God. And they shall live secure, for now he shall be great to the ends of the earth, and he shall be the one of peace. If the Assyrians come into our land and tread upon our soil, we will raise against them 7 shepherds and 8 installed as rulers.